In today's episode, Sarah Landis interviews Bobby Spurlock, who is a licensed clinical social worker and perinatal mental health specialist. They discuss the complexities of postpartum depression, birth trauma, and infant loss. Bobby shares her insights on how these experiences impact both mothers and their partners, highlighting the deep connection between mental health and physical well-being. But before we dive in, we wanted to let you know about our new offering coming up soon. Sarah and I are hosting a new class series called the Menopause Masterclass with a fitness and wellness emphasis, which will be an 8-week series. Sign up today to get on our waitlist and be the first to learn about this course. And there will be a link in the show notes. Welcome to the V Movement, the podcast that's all about pelvic health and getting the V's in your life moving. We are your hosts, Allison Craig, physical therapist specializing in pelvic health,
and Sarah Landis, physical therapist and board-certified women's health specialist. In each episode, we delve into the world of pelvic health, exploring everything from the vulva and vagina to the vagus nerve.
Whether you're looking to enhance your understanding of pelvic health, seeking advice on common concerns, or simply want to join a community that embraces these important discussions, the V Movement is the place to be.
So tune in and let's embark on this journey together towards better pelvic health. Because when it comes to the V's in our lives, movement is key. Well, hello, the famous Bobby Spurlock. Thank you so much for joining us here at the V Movement. For those of you who don't know, this is Bobby. She is an amazing LCSW who specializes in everything maternal health, right?
Sure. Yeah. I'm certified. I'm certainly certified in perinatal mental health. And I do because of our community. Like I see everyone from postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, grief, loss, all of the things. If you were to ask me to like really say what my specialty area is, it's really around birth trauma, infant loss, pregnancy and infant loss, fertility. Those are the kinds of cases that I really specialize in, but I see the whole spectrum and work with the whole spectrum of perinatal mental health population. So conception or like preconception through having a baby. And then what makes you not postpartum? Like, who's to say? Once you've had a baby, you're always postpartum, right?
Like 1,000,000%.
Great. So the TSN says like 1 year. I don't buy it.
No. I mean, that's an entire rabbit hole. You're cleared after 8 weeks of a C-section.
Mm-hmm.
Or 6 with not, I mean, these are things that don't really fit into our lives.
Right.
Yeah. So really quick, you have a in-person practice in Fortuna.
I do telehealth and in person. I do both.
And telehealth.
Yeah. Yes.
And you are BobbySpurlock.com.
I am.
Is that the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah. It's a great way. You can send a message right there. It goes directly to an email. Also my phone number, my work phone number, which is 707-298-1739 that you can call and leave a message or send a text message that way. And that's the other good way to get in touch with me.
Are you accepting new patients?
Well, that's a fluid question, Sarah. Sometimes, yes. And sometimes I have a waiting list. Sometimes I have 6 openings at once and they just like happen for like a variety of reasons. And then sometimes I don't have an opening for months. And so like at this very moment when we're speaking, I do have an opening.
One.
I have an opening right now, but maybe 2. I might even have 2 openings right now. But like if you ask me tomorrow, that could be a different question. It's Sunday, so maybe not. But so it's kind of always, it's fluid because, well, for a variety of reasons, but I do a lot of trauma work too. And so I'm certified in EMDR and expressive arts therapy. And so I feel like there's always people with trauma being sent my way. So it kind of fills up quickly because birth trauma is something that it's more common. And
Tell me more about birth trauma.
Birth trauma is anytime a woman is having an experience during their birthing process where it can feel traumatic, which can just mean it feels like people are doing things to them without consent. Like when people think about birth trauma, they think about, I had a huge major physical trauma, or I had stillbirth, or right, like these kinds of like big T types of trauma, but it can also be very traumatic if you have a history of any kind of trauma, or consider like a history of sexual trauma, and then the experience of giving birth, having a baby, to be in a situation where it feels like you don't have a say, or where people are telling you what to do, or just doing things to your body without consent, or without your understanding, or where you feel like you can't say no, right? And so in
Or
the
you're
birth,
in pain.
you're in pain. You feel like you can't even make a decision, right?
Right.
So all of these reasons that can come into play for reasons that your birth can actually feel traumatic and not as empowering as this image of, I'm going to go birth this baby and I'm going to be super empowered and my wishes are going to be heard. Like that's not always the case. And especially if there is some kind of medical emergency, I think that pops up is that we stop talking to the birthing person then, right? And we just start like doing things for medical reasons, right? Like we're trying to save people. To be in that position of being this vulnerable birthing person in this super vulnerable period in your life, and people are just doing things to you. And then you come out on the other side, and that can feel really like, what just happened to me? And then there are people who have these really incredible traumas where they have a complicated C-section, or they're separated from their babies, or their babies go to the NICU, or their babies don't make it, or they went into birth and labor knowing their baby already didn't have a heartbeat, right? Birth trauma is a big reason people are sent to me, and there's no shortage of birth trauma,
And
especially in our small community.
and especially, I just want to emphasize, and I thought you did such a good job of it, but people so much just associate it with actual physical trauma, but the mental, emotional aspect of and how that can really show up in their physical presence,
Yeah.
right? So all this trauma stuff, it doesn't just have to be physical. It can be mental trauma as well. And I think both of us, and why we refer so many patients back and forth to each other, is because it's so interconnected.
Well, and it's so interconnected, and it then impacts what happens postpartum, which impacts then my relationship with my baby, which impacts my baby's mental health, right? Like if you want me to start like the ripple effect of, right, like this incident can then impact how I see myself as a parent, how I'm able to parent, my relationship with my partner, my relationship with my other children, my ability to bond with this child. If I've lost a baby, I still have to go through postpartum, right? What if I had a complicated birth and I have a stillbirth, and then I have to go through postpartum recovery? And so, like, it's all so the ripple effect is so big. It's also intermingled that sometimes we think about these things as an incident, like, well, but you got through the birth. So many people I've heard say, well, like, yeah, your birth was terrible, but look, you have this healthy baby, right? And it's like, well, we're dismissing this really big thing that can be impacting that healthy baby or my relationship with that healthy baby. And so, really understanding that just because this event happened doesn't mean like it ended for that parent or those parents.
Right.
Sometimes an event can feel more traumatic in some cases for a partner who's witnessing it. I recently was talking to someone who was talking about like my birth in itself, like my actual birth wasn't traumatic for me. It was after my birth that felt traumatic. But for my partner, witnessing my birth was so traumatic. They experienced fear that I was going to die. This isn't just the birthing person, but there's this other person or people who are also having these experiences, and that impacts it. If my partner feels really traumatized by the birthing experience and the fear that something bad's going to happen to me, it can impact their ability also bond, form this new family, right? Because that's its own whole thing is like, well, now we are these new people. What do we do with that?
Yeah. And they talk about, I read an article recently about postpartum depression specifically, and that it's not just the birthing person, that it can also be their partner that goes through severe postpartum depression.
I think the statistic that I'm familiar with is, I believe it's like 1 in 5 birthing persons will experience a postpartum mood or anxiety disorder. And 1 in 10 partners also have a higher risk of having a mood or anxiety disorder. I can use myself for an example. When I had my middle son, I personally had a very crippling anxiety disorder, very, very unfunctional anxiety disorder for many months after I had him. He's 8 years old now. I remember my husband saying, like, it was so hard for me because you were like the rock of our family. You always kind of held it together. You navigated everything, you did all the things. And so it was like really impactful for me when you couldn't do that. I didn't really know how to take that or even what to do. So it really impacted his mood. It made him very anxious, and it made him like really have a big response to like, this feels really unstable and crazy. Because I was suffering, he in turn also really suffered. He would probably be one of those 1 in 10 who has, since having children, has a diagnosed mood or anxiety disorder. Like, that's real. And he would admit to that as well. That was a huge impact. And even if the birthing person doesn't, it doesn't mean the partner can't. But if the birthing person does, that impact is huge on partners and children.
And I think that that is such a common thing. That is that piece of the puzzle that just goes so underdiagnosed and undertreated because the partners aren't the ones going to the medical appointments and aren't seeking out help.
Moms are only going to medical appointments for 6 weeks. After that, it's just for their babies. I recall having a conversation with a pediatrician one time, and I'm like, moms are falling through the hoop because at 6 weeks we can screen them, but not all moms have a mood or anxiety disorder by 6 weeks. It's not uncommon to see a mom really start struggling at 4 months,
100%.
right? When it's like, oh my gosh, this isn't ending. Like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. Or, oh my gosh, my baby just stopped sleeping. What is going on here? My partner is now fully back at work. No one's bringing me food. What is happening here? They're not seeing someone unless they had a really complicated birth and they're physically still recovering, or they already had some kind of anxiety disorder, which extended their disability. They're no longer seeing doctors, right? So they're only coming in contact with doctors through the pediatrician. But the pediatrician, in most cases, is not screening the parent because the parent's not their client. And if they get a positive screen, what do they do with that? And they're not going to be paid for it. So in reality, mom's got a 6-week window for someone to be screening her unless she's connected to services. And then unless she's really struggling, no one's doing, like my pediatrician used to say, like, are you anxious? Are you depressed? What are you doing about it? That was all he did. There's this huge gap. Unless I am really struggling, I'm not getting help. We have all these statistics about perinatal mental health, and so much of it is going unreported because we're just trying to survive and getting to a therapist, getting to doctors saying, I need help. Number one, I don't have time. And number two, if I say I need help, is someone going to make a CWS report on me? Or that's the fear, the dialogue I hear so often from moms is like, it's scary to think I could be punished for saying I need help, right? And so it prevents people from going to get help.
Totally.
Or I don't want to be seen as a bad mom. Everyone else has it together, right?
Right. Like, look at all these other super moms.
The super mom. The unobtainable goal that none of us will ever actually meet, but we all think that we should or could meet it, right? Like this, it's because there's this cultural picture painted that like, we can do that, right? We can bake the baked goods and maybe have the job or be this perfect homeschooling, home parenting mom. Because like, if you stay home with your kids, you should probably be like homesteading, right? That's kind of like societal image. And if you're working, you should work, but you should also bake the baked goods for the
and make dinner every night.
And make dinner, and your house should be really clean, right? Like all of these things, but no one person can actually do any of that. Like it's actually impossible. We burn ourselves out. And then we wonder, like, why am I yelling at my kids? Why is my relationship so crazy? Why don't I have any friends? Why do I feel so tired?
Right.
Oh, because like I'm not resting. I'm not taking care of myself, and I'm trying to be this thing that no one can actually be, but we all think we should be in order to be worthy or like good.
Right.
Yeah.
Preach.
Good stuff, you know? Good
But
stuff.
it's so real. And I mean, both of us have so many kids and we just see it in so many different aspects of our lives. I see it in the way that people's pelvic floors show up, that postpartum anxiety, that supermom anxiety, not feeling good enough, not feeling accomplished enough. Then, and we've talked about this so many times, comes with their pelvic floors that are so tight
Mm-hmm.
and painful. They're wondering why they're constipated and having pain with sex, which is then impacting their relationship, which is also impacting all of the other different aspects of their life. And it's like,
Well, it's impacting their mood too, right? And then they're like, I was never a person who yelled and was so impatient. And now I'm yelling at my kids and can't have a normal conversation with my partner. And people are confused, right? Like, we're not allowed to take care of ourselves or check in and say, how am I feeling? What's my body telling me? What do I need? One of my favorite analogies that I talk about is the dashboard in the car. Most of us have driven a car. So it's like a very easy analogy. If we haven't, we've ridden in the car. So we're kind of familiar, right? It's like we drive our car around and we're like, oh, the gas tank's getting low. We need to put some gas in the car. The car's not going to drive anymore. Or like we need to change the oil. And our bodies are so cool. They're fully equipped with dashboards. If we learn to listen to them again, they would be like, hey, yo, lady, put some gas in the tank. You're going to need an oil change or to break down. And then we're like, the check engine light is like hardcore flashing. And we're like, I got this. I'm just going to do that field trip. And then we're tense and we're yelling and we're unhappy and we feel depressed and we feel anxious and we can't get all the things done because we're driving the car that's literally breaking down, and we feel guilty and shame if we're like, I need to put some gas in the car. Like, oh, I need to take the afternoon off and I do a thing for me. Particularly as parents, then we're really guilty because shouldn't you be with your kids if you're not working? And then
all the things. Yeah.
yeah.
So what do people who are going through trauma, people who are going through just that postpartum anxiety, depression, what are some great tools or resources?
See a therapist right away. Well, actually, no. See a therapist, but like really like great to see a therapist, but like find a group. That's my number one. Even before see a therapist, find your group. So is that your Postpartum Support International? Like it's a million different kinds of support groups for pregnant through the conception through postpartum, right? Like, is it that? Is it a local group? Is it just your group of mama friends? Find a group, right? Number one, we need social connection in this time. This is not a time we're meant to be isolated. We're not supposed to do it on our own, right? This idea that we do this in this little nuclear family without any support is like,
which is
ridiculous.
We were in villages, literally.
And so if you look at like tribal format, that's how it's sustainable because everyone's a chance. So find your group, even if that group is just like a text group where you are like able to speak your real truth of, I have been up for 3 nights and I seriously feel like I'm going to jump out the window because I just can't. Like, I'm not really, but I feel like it, I'm going to throw the baby at the wall. All those thoughts that come into your head, like find someone you can say them to. So find your group, find a therapist. You were just talking about tools for attention. So I always talk about ways to relax your body. But the first thing that I teach anyone, whether you're coming to me just for trauma or whether we're in the postpartum period, is learning to listen to our body because we're a culture that's mostly from the neck up now. We're very in our head. If we have trauma, we've turned off our body a lot. We don't want to listen to what our body is saying. But what all of us in the whole world could benefit from is learning to listen to our bodies. So I'll tell people, start the check-in like 3 times a day when I wake up, when I do lunch, and before I go to bed if you have to. I mean, eventually you want to just be listening to like, what's my body telling me? But I always tell people, check in the morning, like before you even get out of bed, be like, where am I at? How do I feel? Like, do I feel good? Do I feel bad? What do I need? Is it neutral? Is it positive? Is it negative? What's my feeling like? And What do I need? If I feel great, maybe I just need to get up and I don't really need to do anything. I just need to like continue my day. Maybe if I'm feeling really terrible, it's like, oh, well, I need to take a shower. That's going to help. And I need to like eat some breakfast. I need to do these things to help me. If we're doing that throughout the day, if we're listening, we're asking our body, like, how do you feel? What do you need? We're less likely to get to the end of the day and be screaming at our kids or our partner, feel like I'm going to fall apart because I'm attending to my body all day long and paying attention. Instead of all day long, it's being ignored and then you're just getting more and more, right? Like they're shoving more and more things in that jack in the box, it's cranking it and cranking it. And at the end of the night, just when bedtime gets hard, we're freaking out. And so, I talk about checking in, and then along with checking in is I use the tackle box analogy of your coping skills, your quick things that like, I need a snack. I could light that candle or put in the essential or like really easy things. I can put on my favorite sweatpants or my favorite sweatshirt. Those are quick things I can do. If I just need to shift my mood, give myself a little boost, then there's the next level. So that's like the basics in the tackle box. And the next level is, the 10-minute walk. When I actually need to do on my lunch break, I need to go outside and take a 10-minute walk. I need to call a friend and have a chat. I need to meditate for 10 minutes, whatever your 10-minute thing is. I just need to take some breaths. I need to do a grounding exercise, right? So those are for like bigger shifts. I'm really struggling. I need to reset. And then, of course, there's your big coping skill things like I need a day. When I take a day, I go for a hike all day, or like I do this thing with my friend, or I go whatever, right? But so like knowing there's different levels of self-care. When you're checking in with yourself throughout the day, what do I need? Can I put on my favorite sweatshirt? Can I put on the playlist in my office to help me shift the mood? Or do I need to go out and take that 10-minute walk? Everyone benefits when I can listen to my body and take care of myself. Then I have more patience. I'm more productive. I can be calmer with my kids. I can connect and engage with my partner.
I love that. I love the tackle box analogy. That is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think because I do something similar with my patients as well, but I think one thing that really helps them connect with it is this is for you and you are connecting better with your surroundings, but you're also setting a really good example, right? This is through action, you are teaching not only just the people around you, but especially the next generation, these
Right.
different skills and different ways to show up in the world like each day.
Absolutely. And I think that that's like one for moms in particular, the script that we've been given. And so many women who come to my office say is like, I never saw my mom take a break.
Right.
Right. And so my idea of a good mom is someone who doesn't take a break, because really that's what I was modeled for me. That's what I saw, is someone who didn't take a break. And then when we explore that mom was probably burnt out, maybe a little snappy, and didn't seem like they enjoyed their time with their kids as much, but that's what they saw. And so there's really a lot of discussion or coming back to that has to be right. That's what you said. Is that what you want your kids to see? What would you like to model for them? What would you hope for them? And then how can you allow yourself permission to then do those things? Because there's this narrative, this story, this neuro pathway that's been created that says a good mom doesn't take a break, right? She doesn't put herself first. Everyone comes first. Then she figures it out later after everything else is attended to. And that's really strong. It's like a very strong neuro pathway for many, many people, even though they disagree with it, which is that, mom should be able to be present and we want our kids to know when they need a break, right? Like we try and teach our kids, like, what can you do to calm down or take a break? But then we don't allow ourselves that same grace. So how do we really break the neuro pathway or rewrite a new neuro pathway that says it's okay to take breaks? Like your good moms take breaks too. That's the new mottos for me. Good moms take breaks,
I
because
love that.
there's a story that good moms don't take breaks, right? To be a good mom, you're kind of like this martyr and the person who's always out doing something for someone else, your kids, your partner, your house. And if you take a break, then you feel very selfish or, oh, this isn't okay.
But really, it's survival. Let's be real.
Yeah, it's unsustainable not to, right? Like you become a person you don't want to be, very anxious, very depressed when we can't meet these unobtainable goals. I'm very anxious and I'm very depressed.
Yeah, exactly. So shifting gears before we even got on the call, You were talking about, what was it?
I was talking about miscarriage before we got on.
You said it's Miscarriage Awareness Month.
I said it's Infant Loss Awareness Month, and we should
Yeah.
talk about that, which we kind of did. I said we should also talk about miscarriage because that was one of my current soapboxes that I have been seeing so much miscarriage in my office, and just was, as I was telling you, it's really this such this old narrative around we don't tell people that we're pregnant until we're out of the first trimester when the risk of miscarriage reduces, right? And that kind of goes along with this narrative of miscarriage loss isn't valid, right? That we should suffer alone or that other people shouldn't be burdened by your inconvenience is kind of like the general yucky flavor that I get from cultural idea about miscarriage. And I was just really talking about how miscarriage is such a valid loss for people. And it is so under talked about, not recognized, and people can feel really confused when they're grieving a miscarriage with people who are on the fertility journey. Every miscarriage or chemical pregnancy or every transfer that isn't successful is a huge loss, right? I often talk to moms about early pregnancy loss, miscarrying at 7 weeks is there's a thing that happens in our brain as soon as the pregnancy test says positive, or as soon as there's an embryo transfer, we begin to plan the future, even if we're not really conscious of it totally, right? It's oh, well, in 9 months, I'm going to be having a baby then because it said positive. And so that means I won't be working, or that means I have other kids. That's really, so these things start happening. Even if your brain's been doing that for 2 weeks, your brain has already started planning, integrating this new person into your life.
And that's just the mental aspect of it.
Oh,
Because the hormones, the pelvic floor, the uterus,
yeah.
the relaxin levels, so many things are so affected already.
Yes. Yes. And then if you have multiple miscarriages in a row and there's this expectation of not talking about them, it's such an interesting part of my job is the shame that people feel around having grief around miscarriages, or how people just really don't understand it. They share it with their family or other people in their lives who seem to not really get it, that women can sometimes experience my body's kind of failing me, or what did I do wrong? And I think that is a huge thing that carries through all infant loss.
Mm-hmm. It's my fault.
This idea, particularly if it's, all pregnancy loss up and through stillbirth, right? It's did I do something?
Right.
Or if your baby is in the NICU, that's the story I hear from so many moms. Did I do something wrong in my pregnancy? Right? There's moms take on this responsibility.
And it's hard not to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Even if the medical profession can say there was nothing that you could do about this, or 1 in 4 pregnancies can end in a miscarriage. That's a genetic thing that happens. There's still this thing because of the thinking beings that we are that makes us wonder or try and solve it. And then comes back to did I do something? And so a big thing women deal with in therapy is working with that struggle, right? Around.
So I know it's just, again, go to therapy, find a support group, but is there other things that our fabulous listeners can take from working through miscarriage or stillbirth or just loss?
Yeah, I mean, I think that grief is such a personal thing. And I think that is one of the things that I talk to so many people about is being able to ask yourself what's meaningful for you, right? I think when I work with women around stillbirth or really late term loss, there's a lot of questions about like, well, how do you want to continue to integrate this baby into your family, right? And not everyone wants to do that the same way. For some families, they really want to like hang a stocking every year, or they're like ways that they're really integrating. But so, what are the meaningful things? But for everyone, I like to like really encourage some kind of ritual. That can be as much as like going to the beach and like spending time. That can be writing stories, right? Like, so for me, I'm always working with people individually around like, what would be meaningful for you? What could symbolize this pregnancy for you, or this loss for you, or this baby for you, or how can we continue? Right. So for one of my moms who's had a couple losses, she symbolizes that or memorializes that with planting plants or a tree. She often does a tree with her losses, but a way to continue to honor that for her, a place she can go to recognize those losses. And those are with early pregnancy loss, right? But to find meaning in that. And again, to be able to honor that you can grieve, even if society says that you can't, to really normalize. I feel like for me, that's a big part of it is just normalizing. Like, of course you feel sad. There are parts of you that will never be the same. For so many people, when you get a positive pregnancy test, we automatically assume the outcome is a healthy baby. There's so many outcomes along the way. And if we have a loss of any kind, that naivety of a healthy baby as a result of a positive pregnancy test goes away.
Right. Right. Or it's interesting. I see it so much in my patients that are medical providers. They know too much. It's the anxiety that can be crippling.
Absolutely. People who work in OB
Yep.
have
That's the same.
seen all the things that can go wrong, right? The second they get a positive pregnancy test, the anxiety can start flooding in. And I mean, and I think that can be so real with anyone with any kind of trauma that's related to pregnancy. Like, we could spend hours just talking about trauma in all of these kinds of situations, but a positive pregnancy test for many people means anxiety, right?
Totally. Totally. And yeah, it means so many things. So- Oh, yeah. It's pretty wild.
It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. And I think, you know, every pregnancy has a story to begin with, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like there's, again, it's like these societal stories or these ideas we get that when you want to have a baby, you just have a baby with someone, like, right? Like,
Yeah.
so we're going to have kids and that's how it
Oh,
happens.
and
But
then
like,
all of a sudden you just have a baby.
yeah, but that's not really how it happens for so many people. And yet there's still that story out there that is how it happens. And so it feels really confusing when there's loss involved or when a fertility issue comes up,
Yeah.
the amount of trauma that can come from all of these kinds of things. And then what happens then for subsequent pregnancies, or if there isn't a pregnancy, what happens if I spend 5 years on a fertility journey and it doesn't result in a baby? Easy answers for tools around grief. For me, not tons, but just a lot of asking about meaning making and finding, like, my biggest thing is I always want people to find some kind of ritual or celebration or a thing they can do. Even if that is going to the beach and writing something in the sand and watching the waves
Totally.
take it away. Even if that's going into nature and like just sitting with yourself and thinking about that loss or feeling the feelings about loss and creating whatever with leaves. There doesn't have to be a thing, but it's acknowledging. And it's okay too if I have a loss and I feel like, okay, I don't have a lot of big feelings about that loss,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because I think that people are across the spectrum, but
Just like
when,
anything.
yeah, just like with anything. But when we do have feelings about that loss, like making sure there's ritual or ceremony is so, so important. Like we talked about villages and tribes in the beginning.
Yeah.
Part of that culture was ritual and ceremony. And so a lot of grief and loss work for me is around creating ritual and ceremony And then
Love that.
integrating. How do we keep that? Particularly with infant loss or neonatal loss, how do we keep the story of this special person who was part of our life? How do we integrate them into our families if they're not here? Their presence
Right.
isn't here. And so often that comes around ritual or ceremony. What's your ritual or your ceremony around including them or honoring them? And it can look so different for everyone, right? But
Yeah.
it's so important to make sure it's meaningful for your family, your culture, your religion,
Yeah.
which is so interesting because there are definitely religions and cultures where a stillborn baby is maybe a sign that that child wasn't meant to come into that family. And then if you struggle and you have grief with that, there can be a lot of complication around like, how do I navigate that? Because it's very different than what my culture believes. And now I'm
Right.
feeling sad and I maybe shouldn't feel sad.
Right. The cultural aspects of all of it are very heavy. Oh, see, Bobby, this is why you are the Bobby Spurlock. I mean, it's amazing. It's totally amazing. I really, really, cultural and ceremony. It just seemed, that's ritual. Yeah.
We leave it out so much of our lives. I think now our new modern life is so fast paced that like so much culture and ceremony has been left out. And I think that coming from an expressive arts perspective, also there's like the creating and moving and coming into is a lot of that ritual and ceremony and a lot of those things that might be considered more on like a spiritual realm. And so I think it is so important. It's something that I talk a lot to people about when they have lost culturally. What does this mean? How do we make meaning of this? And
Yeah.
how does that fit for you? Right? Because that's all actually really important stuff that gets left out when people are grieving. And also because we live in a society where grief is just the last, like postpartum is 6 weeks, grief is 2 weeks. Or like if you work for the county 5 days of bereavement, right? So like there's this idea, this finite thing that you just do when you get done with a lot of grief work for me is talking about normalizing that if you had a loss, if you had a stillbirth, you're not going to be over it in 2 weeks and going back to work. That's so normal and should not be expected of you. And if you're still having a hard time in 6 months, also normal. And if you're still having a hard time in a year, also normal. And the first year is going to be really hard. It's unrealistic to expect that someone who's had a loss, a big loss, is going to not have big emotions and feelings throughout a year when there's first holidays and what would be a first birthday and a Mother's Day when a baby is not right. Like, of course, there's going to be a year of some pretty intense grieving. And then that's going to continue in waves through your life, right? It's not this destination or this end. Had my 5 days of bereavement, ready to get on with life.
Here we go. Yeah. But again, going back to just the societal, that quote unquote supermom, right? They can handle anything.
Yeah, we're not supposed to really have emotions or feelings. We're supposed to like
That's true.
feel them like so quickly and then just move along. I'm sad that happened. Time to go back to work now. And but the reality is also like I'm talking about work and that's real and messed up. But the reality is the moms who have these traumas, like if you have a baby and then you have an infant loss or a stillbirth or a miscarriage, the reality is you still have to parent a child and you are called to just go on with your life.
Yeah.
Really being able to honor and talk to people about how difficult that is and
Yeah.
how extra important it is to make space for grieving. I think often one of the really confusing things is that partners can often grieve very differently or need to grieve very differently. It's okay that your partner maybe isn't grieving the same way as you and that you need to make space for yourself. Some grieving can be done independently and some can be done together. It's okay to honor your grieving and your partner's grieving if they look different. That's normal. And it doesn't mean that maybe your partner shuts down and you're a really loud griever. It doesn't mean your partner didn't love your baby. And so it's really hard. So there's a lot of that comes in grief work too, really learning that it's okay to grieve in your own way. Like you don't have to do what society thinks is um, okay. Like it doesn't have to be over in 2 weeks. And
Bobby, just a wealth of knowledge over here. I really appreciate it. I think it's so awesome the work that you do. And I just think it's so, so important for people to have as a resource. But you also do retreats, you do all of the different things. I just want to thank you for being such a great resource for the community. I think it's really awesome.
thank you for having me, Sarah. It's fun. I mean, I think that I come from county mental health, really, is my background. Lots of private mental health work. And when I went into private practice, I really wanted to just be able to like meet community needs in a variety of ways. And so it's been awesome to be able to. I've done some work with different community resource centers where I've come out and done days, like deep dive days with moms. And it's been really fun to teach. I got to speak for residents, in some of the programs. So it's been a pleasure being able to meet our community in a variety of ways, which was one of my goals going into private practice. Be able to get knowledge out there on lots of different forefronts, right? Because I think a lot of it is too that like professionals also are like, because the awareness around perinatal mental health is so new. I say new because it's
right,
like nuts, but it's so new that actually they aren't like people aren't being educated about it, like even as far as providers. And so it's not just about treating people, it's about educating providers. It's about educating the community and normalizing it, right? So making it so that people realize most moms struggle with something. And so if we are all say, yeah, we're all like imperfect humans and it's hard for all of us, none of us are perfect at this, we will feel less shame about getting help. We'll feel less shame about going to the group and saying like, wow, today was really hard. Right. So, my goal was to be able to reach multiple levels because this is a multi-level issue until we can recognize it on a governmental level, right? Which I think is finally happening, right? Big report recently released. And then look at policies. And this is an issue way bigger than just mom, right? And so there's like so many places our little fingers have to get into to really make it this like a sustainable world for families. Because that's really what we're talking about. Like we talk about perinatal mental health. I work with moms and birthing people. Untreated perinatal mental health impacts families. It impacts marriages. It impacts infant mental health. It impacts our children's mental health. So it's just one layer. It's just one layer.
That's right. We're just all doing our part to help with.
That's right. We're all part of the puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why we do the podcast, right? Is to try to educate and bring different resources and talk about all the things. So I really, really appreciate you being here. And, I'm just going to hit you up all the time. Be like, hey,
perfect.
What else you got? Let's do
that. That's how we do it.
I know. I love it. Well, happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, Sarah Landis.
And go take off all those hats.
Yeah, we wear all the hats. I'm going to go put my house cleaning hat on. Because it's Sunday and I have to wash clothes for all those kids you were talking about and prepare for the school week and the work week and the field trip, all of the things I'm expected to do as a working mom.
Oh. Well, good luck.
See you later.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for tuning in. Reminder to get on the waitlist for the Menopause Masterclass Fitness and Wellness series. Link will be in the show notes. You can also reach us at info@thevmove.com or on Instagram at thev.movement. Until next time, keep the V's in your life moving. The information shared in this podcast by Sarah, Allison, and our guest interviews are intended for educational, entertainment, and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. While we are licensed physical therapists, we are not your personal physical therapists, and no patient-provider relationship is formed. If you have any health concerns or questions, please consult your medical provider. The information on this podcast or any of our other platforms is to use at your own risk.